Michael stared at the security monitor without blinking. His restaurant had only been open for a month. A dream he had worked toward for years. Saved for. Sacrificed for. Lived for. He didn't yet have the money to hire professional security. No guards, no surveillance team. Just a few cameras he'd installed 3 days ago, mostly for peace of mind. He wasn't naive. He knew how businesses fail. Not always from the outside. Sometimes from within. Employees steal. Not all, not always. But it happens. And a young business cannot afford small losses. And now, on the screen in front of him, he saw something that made his jaw tighten. The dishwasher, a quiet young girl named Valia, was dragging a large, overstuffed bag toward the back exit. A very large bag. Too large. He checked the timestamp. End of shift. She was leaving through the side door, the one the manager locked afterward from the inside, which explained why no one noticed anything unusual. 3 days of cameras. 3 days of footage. How long had this been happening? A week? A month? Since opening day? Michael stood up slowly. Theft must be stopped immediately. If you let it grow, it becomes a culture. Still, something didn't fit. She was so young, barely more than a girl. Quiet, hard-working, polite. She never complained. She didn't look like someone who could steal. But looks deceive. He grabbed his coat. Michael lived 3 intersections away, 5 minutes by car. He pulled up to the restaurant parking lot just before closing time and turned off his headlights. He waited. Snow was beginning to fall, soft and slow. The back door opened. Valia stepped out, adjusting her small white work cap. She looked around carefully, almost nervously. Then she bent down and lifted the large bag with visible effort. Michael narrowed his eyes. That bag was heavy. She whispered something as she shifted it on her shoulder. He couldn't hear it. What he didn't know, what he could never have imagined, was what she was whispering to. "Almost there, my angel. Just a little longer," Valia murmured softly. Inside the bag, tiny holes had been carefully punctured near the seams. 30 minutes earlier, she had fed Angelina. The baby would sleep deeply now. Her 1-month-old daughter. Valia had done everything to prepare. She had checked the holes twice. She had wrapped Angelina carefully. She had timed her feeding perfectly. She knew it was wrong. If anyone found out, they could take her baby away. But she had no other choice. Her milk had dried up the day the threats began. Formula was expensive. Government benefits covered only half the month. There were diapers, utilities, rent. She had searched desperately for work. Then she saw the posting. New restaurant opening, hiring staff. When she went to the interview, she didn't yet know how she would manage. Her neighbor had warned her. She could babysit only twice a week. And even then, only if Valia cleaned her apartment in exchange. Valia had nearly given up. Until she saw the restaurant storage room. Spacious. Quiet. Shelves filled with extra dishes, and she would be the only dishwasher. The idea had come suddenly. Dangerous. Crazy. But possible. The first day she brought Angelina to work, her hands shook so badly she thought she would faint. But the baby was calm. Angelina barely cried. She slept. She lay quietly among stacked boxes of plates in the clean storage room. Valia kept everything spotless. No one noticed. No one suspected. And for 4 weeks, it worked. Michael stepped out of his car just as Valia turned around. They nearly collided. She gasped. "So," Michael said quietly, "what are you taking home in that bag?" Valia stiffened. I'm not stealing anything." "Oh, really?" he replied, crossing his arms. "That bag could feed half the restaurant." "I've never stolen anything," she said firmly, standing protectively in front of it. Michael's expression hardened. "Open it, or I call the police." Her breath caught. Inside the bag, something shifted. A tiny sound. Michael heard it. He froze. Valia slowly knelt down. Her hands trembled as she unzipped the bag. Michael stepped closer. And then he inhaled sharply. Inside the bag lay a baby, wrapped tightly in blankets, sleeping. A baby. He stared at Valia. "Is that yours?" She carefully lifted Angelina into her arms. "Yes." "You bring your baby to work?" She swallowed. "Am I fired?" The question wasn't dramatic. It wasn't hysterical. It was tired. Michael stared at the baby, then at her. This wasn't theft. This was desperation. "Where do you live?" he asked finally. "Just around the corner." "I'm walking you." "You don't have to." "I'm walking you." Inside her apartment, the reality hit him harder. It was clean. Too clean. Minimal furniture, no decorations, almost no food. This was not someone profiting from theft. This was survival. He asked for tea. She let him in. She changed the baby, prepared formula, just enough to make her sleep. Michael noticed how carefully she measured it, how she hesitated. She was calculating every gram. On the kitchen table, he saw documents, debt notices, medical bills, threatening letters. "Who are these people?" he asked quietly. Valia hesitated. Then she told him everything. About losing her grandmother. About falling in love with a man who disappeared when she got pregnant, stealing what little valuables she had. About shame. About the strangers who came to pressure her to sell the apartment. About threats. "Accidents happen," they told her. "Children become orphans." That day, her milk dried up. Completely. And she knew fear had taken over her body. Work was her only escape. Michael listened without interrupting. He didn't look at her much, because he felt something tightening in his chest. He knew what it was like to grow up powerless. He had grown up with alcoholic parents. He had been removed from that home at age 9. If someone hadn't intervened, he didn't want to think about it. "Take 2 days off," he said finally. "What?" "Stay home. I'll handle something." "Handle what?" He stood. "We'll figure it out." On the hallway table, before leaving, he quietly placed several large bills. She found them later and cried against the wall. The next day, when Valia stepped outside briefly to buy medicine because Angelina had a fever, she came back to find 3 people inside her apartment, the same men, and a woman. They sat comfortably at her table. "Well," one of them smirked, "ready to sell?" "I'm calling the police," she snapped. "Go ahead, but remember, accidents happen." One of them stood and stepped toward her. Valia backed up, and suddenly, the man flew sideways, hit the floor. Michael stood behind him. "Anyone else need help understanding?" he asked calmly. They left quickly. Michael turned to Valia. "Why didn't you tell me? I didn't think they'd come back." He looked at her pale face. "Pack your things." "What?" "You're staying at my place, now." His apartment was large, warm, safe. He gave her his bedroom, moved into the smaller guest room without discussion. She cleaned his kitchen out of habit, cooked dinner. He returned with a crib, a stroller, clothes. She panicked. "I can't pay you back." He smiled. "Who asked you to?" That night, neither of them slept much. Michael lay awake, realizing something frightening. He didn't want her to leave. Not because he felt responsible, but because he felt alive. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone in his home. In the morning, over breakfast, he said casually, "We should get married." Her knife clattered to the floor. "What?" "It would protect you legally, and Angelina deserves a father." She stared at him. "That's the most unromantic proposal in history." He tried to find the right words, to explain that he had fallen in love quietly, that her strength humbled him, that her fear broke his heart. But before he could speak, she leaned across the table and kissed him. Soft, gentle, and everything changed.